Hi, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from RicoScores, and we have a lot of catching up to do, man. I wasn't able to get a video out yesterday, but we have to talk about everything that's gone down these past 2 days. First of all, yesterday, the Washington Commanders interviewed offensive coordinator, currently Washington Commanders offensive coordinator, because he's literally still on contract with the team for our potential head coaching vacancy. Also, Rams defensive coordinator Raheem will get a second interview, along with, sadly, Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn. Also, Rivera is interviewing for the Philadelphia Eagles defensive coordinator job. Rivera to the Eagles, Dan Quinn to the Commanders. A little NFC East carousel type of situation. Also, the Panthers are out here struggling to find a GM right now, and I love it because that only increases our chances of getting Ben Johnson as our head coach. Because why would you as a head coach want to go take a head coaching job somewhere that doesn't even have a GM yet? You would hope that the GM is part of the package and you know exactly where they are and this is what they want to do. This is their plan for how to build the future. That's crazy. Also, speaking of the Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, with his greatness, it delays the Washington Commanders interview for the head coaching vacancy. We'll talk about when we can interview him the soonest in person for that second interview. Also, same thing with Ravens defensive coordinator Mike Macdonald and his Ravens dominating, including the going against the Texans offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick, who's another top candidate. Also, the Bears look pretty poised to draft Caleb Williams first overall. Let's just go ahead and get that out the way. We're going to talk about how and why and some more things on top of all of that as well. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. I'm back on track, so expect 2 to 3 videos a day. Once again, we're right back at it. Sorry I wasn't able to do a video yesterday, but y'all will get so much content. I have so many things. Shouts out my boy Ken Johannesson over there on Twitter, man. That's my dog over there. He's already updating players that the Commanders have met with for potential draft prospects and things like that. We're going to start diving into those things. We're going to start diving into all kinds of off-season scenarios. We're going to do more mock drafts, head coaching candidates, offensive coordinator candidates, defensive coordinator candidates, all of that type of stuff. So make sure you stay tuned. And again, film sessions on college prospects for channel members only coming soon as well. Let's go ahead and get to this video, though. That's the important part right now. Let's get to this. Let's get it. All right, let's go ahead and start with Eric Bieniemy. Well, all of this started when Jordan Schultz tweeted out / reported. But most stuff is done through Twitter, so it's kind of the same thing at this point. The Commanders interviewed assistant head coach and offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy for the head coaching position this week. And if you think about it, that's only a half step up. He's already the assistant head coach, and we don't have a head coach. He's technically the closest in line right now. You would think he would technically be first in line, but we're going to talk about why he's not. But the meeting included owner Josh Harris, new GM Adam Peters, and Bieniemy, who I'm told had an excellent and highly detailed approach. So it sounds like we're hearing nothing but good things there. Now, I would have been more surprised if we didn't interview him. Let's just go ahead and get that out the way. That would have just been crazy to not at least give him an interview. That would have been wow. Like, that would have been a far bigger headline. I know some people see Eric Bieniemy interviews for Washington Commanders head coaching job, and then I know a lot of people probably get scared because I know a lot of people prefer Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick, Mike Macdonald, and a lot of those candidates out there potentially. But honestly, the bigger headline would have been Washington Commanders don't even give Eric Bieniemy a chance. Like, go on and pack your bags, man. You're not even being considered. Like, that would have been crazier for sure. And I already know he's not going to get the job. We already know this. But I love the fact that on like the PR side of it, they're saying nothing but great things about him. And they're basically being professional and helping them potentially land somewhere else. Like, you know, if Josh Harris and Adam Peters, with how well they look like they're doing things on the front office side, arguably one of the top front offices already going into this offseason, if they say that Eric Bieniemy was excellent and highly detailed, then that must mean it's true type of thing. Now, of course, a lot of us, including me, like I'm pointing out, will probably recognize this is more of a PR thing to basically do Eric Bieniemy a favor. But you at the very least got a double take on Adam Peters, Josh Harris, with the way that they're running things so smoothly. Everything has been exactly what we wanted, exactly what we hoped, and if anything has exceeded my expectations so far with how they're building this organization bottom up. all the way through. Very thorough, but also very quick. If they're high on Eric Bieniemy, high, basically PR-wise, high on him and saying that he's excellent and highly detailed, maybe that will make other teams really think about it. But just a heads up, I don't believe interviewing a coach currently employed by the team counts towards the Rooney Rule, which is a minimum of 2 minority in-person interviews as well. Let me emphasize that. I brought that up in another video. They have to be in person. So these virtual interviews we've done so far, we haven't done a single in-person interview yet until, I believe, Eric Bieniemy. I think he's our first one. And again, you have to do 2 minority in-person interviews, not virtual, for the Rooney Rule to count. But I'm not exactly sure if Eric Bieniemy, who's already a part of the team, like literally on contract as our offensive coordinator, assistant head coach, counts towards it. Maybe he does, but I'm not 100% sure from what I've seen so far. Also, if the primary trait, you got to think about it, that Peters wants in his head coach's leadership, never know, man. Eric Bieniemy's leadership, I know a lot of players didn't really click with it. They didn't really rock with it too well. Maybe a couple of guys did, but some guys clearly didn't like how hard he was teaching them. And again, I hated that, because I'm like, what are you here for? All of that type of stuff. I was definitely on the side of Eric Bieniemy when it came to the hard coaching, for sure. And it sucks too, because now we are Eric Bieniemy's 17th head coaching interview between 16 different teams since 2019. Poor guy, man. But at the same time, the Commanders, one of the most pass-happy offenses last year in the regular season, ranked tied for 24th in points per game with 19.4, tied for 22nd in yards per play with 5, and then tied for 25th in EPA, expected points added per play, with a negative 0.08, and allowed the 3rd most sacks with 65. Boy, it was looking ugly. I mean, Sam Howell was number 1 for the longest, man. And, the offensive line got it together a little bit. Eric Bieniemy changed a little bit of the play calling. So Sam Howell was still getting sacked, but it was nowhere near as bad as the first half of the season. It's kind of crazy, too, because the first half of the season, when he was getting sacked all of the time, it was when Sam Howell looked his best. And then after he stopped getting sacked as much as when he looked worse. It was actually really weird. But out of the way, we also have to admit, though, that having a first-year starting quarterback in Sam Howell and his up and down talent and being inconsistent, all of that type of stuff, I don't necessarily blame him at all. I blame offensive line. I blame even guys not getting open, like the receivers in a lot of ways. I blame Eric Bieniemy for a lot of things, but at the same time, he did inherit a depth chart that he didn't really put together. They were able to put together a couple of new additions in the offseason between the free agency. I guess Andrew Wiley may have been his guy. The draft, the only guy we know is Chris Rodriguez attached to him. So it seems like it was more. I mean, we drafted 2 corners basically in the first rounds. We didn't do Eric Bieniemy many favors at all. We didn't let him control the draft. We didn't allow him to basically decide who we brought in as free agents or anything like that. You cut Eric Bieniemy from this team. Just say Eric Bieniemy never existed. I feel like we probably make these same exact moves. The only things that may be different is maybe minus Andrew Wiley and maybe minus Chris Rodriguez. Everything else was Ron Rivera and Martin Mayhew, point blank, period. So it's not even like he necessarily had a great opportunity. But at the same time, I still want to move on and go and get a Ben Johnson, Bobby Sloyd, or Mike McDonald. But we do have to take the time to admit that Ben Johnson was not dealt the best hand at this situation, man. But that's it for that. Let's go ahead and move on. So the Washington Commanders will also hold a second in-person interview with Rams defensive coordinator Raheem Morris, and that definitely counts towards the Rooney Rule. So if Eric Bieniemy counts, our Rooney Rule is already out the way. So we'll see how that goes. But he's also scheduling second interviews, in-person interviews, just like us, with the Falcons, the Panthers, and the Seahawks as well. So there's a lot of competition for him, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up getting one of those other head coaching jobs, especially like the Falcons or the Seahawks. I could definitely see that. I think a lot of people are steering clear from the Panthers. I mean, I believe Ben Johnson's one of them. I wouldn't be surprised if Raheem Morris is steering clear away from that as well. And remember, Raheem Morris outdid Ben Johnson in that Lions-Rams playoff game. Again, like I keep saying, the Lions won, but you can argue Aaron Glenn did a better job than Ben Johnson did, where Aaron Glenn, as defensive coordinator for the Lions, was probably the MVP out of the coordinators in that game. Ben Johnson had a great first half, especially a really good first quarter. But that second half, boy, Raheem Morris shut that down. completely shut it down. So he's a really good head coaching candidate out there. And he was also part of the 2013 Washington Commanders coaching staff curse, where we had everybody and they mom, all the top head coaches right now outside of basically Andy Reid was part of that 2013 staff. And you can't forget that Raheem Morris was one of them. So you never know. He may circle back and become the head coach here. I doubt it, but you never know, man. They may have been impressed. Adam Peters may be very impressed with him. And we're talking about leadership. He's that guy. I remember seeing, I think a couple of days ago, Jalen Ramsey, like out of nowhere on Twitter, like standing up for Raheem Morris and saying that if you ask players around, especially Rams players, the coach that they would want to play for the most as a potential head coaching candidate is Raheem Morris. Like, you have players left and right sticking up for this guy. So when you're talking leadership, Raheem Morris may actually be #1 on the candidacy list if that is what Adam Peters is actually looking for. So keep that in mind. Now let's talk about this defensive coordinator carousel. Since we're talking about a defensive coordinator and Raheem Morris, let's go ahead and do a smooth little segue. You know what I'm saying? I'm proud of myself for that one. You know what I'm saying? But sadly, the Jaguars hired my favorite defensive coordinator candidate out there for a defensive coordinator, and not for a head coach, but a defensive coordinator. Falcons defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen. Man, I'm sick. Y'all saw the video I just did a couple of days ago talking about and breaking down exactly why and how he's my favorite defensive coordinator candidate out there, especially if we go with an offensive-minded head coach like a Ben Johnson, a Bobby Slowick. He's the type of guy, you just tell him, do everything defensively. I'll be the head coach and I'll handle the offense. You handle the defense on your own. All of that's you. I don't even have to meddle. I don't have to intervene or anything like that. And I'm really sad to see that the Jaguars got him. I already knew, though. I mean, I talked about it in the video before we even dove into why he's such a great defensive coordinator candidate. Before that, before we even got into all of the X's and O's and stats, I told y'all that the Jaguars are quite likely to get him. And I said that the sooner that Ben Johnson loses and gets out of the playoffs, the quicker we can potentially bring him in as a head coach so we can compete for the top coordinators at different positions, like especially defensive coordinator if we're going defensive-minded head coach. So Ben Johnson can still winning, still going further and further into the playoffs, being a Super Bowl contender. It's kind of hurting us in a way because a lot of the top defensive coordinators out there are already interviewing and getting jobs, taking jobs elsewhere and things like that. Whereas if we could have went ahead and hired Ben Johnson sooner, maybe we could have brought him in as a head coach and maybe we could have convinced my boy Ryan Nielsen to come over and be our defensive coordinator. But we don't have a head coach yet, so we can't hire these top guys. There's still a couple of more top guys out there like my boy Don Wink Martindale, ex-Giants defensive coordinator that I really like as well. It's like a really nice second place. But man, I am really sick about losing out on my boy Ryan Nielsen. I'm not gonna lie. But also, Titans Shane Bowen and our Chris Harris were candidates of getting that job. They interviewed for the same job, but of course the Jaguars took Ryan Nielsen for the exact reason I already explained. He was probably the first defensive coordinator hired so far in this offseason. I believe so, unless I missed somebody. And that goes without saying. Again, I already did a whole video breakdown. I'm not surprised. He was the top defensive coordinator candidate out there for reasons I've already explained. So I'm not surprised that it seems like he was the first one hired. But again, that leaves former Washington Commanders DBs coach, who a lot of us wanted us to just go ahead and elevate him to defensive coordinator and just move on from Jack Del Rio, give Jack Del Rio some other role or whatever before he left. Now he's made his rounds around the NFL and he's looking for his first defensive coordinator job. Maybe we want to consider bringing in Chris Harris. Again, we originally wanted him before he even left to go to other team. I think he went to the Titans or Cardinals. I forgot where he ended up going, but between those two teams, he ended up doing something for them, but he still wasn't a defensive coordinator. And man, I'm hoping we can go fish him and bring him back, man. Call him back up. I know, hey, I know it's the same burgundy and gold. I know it's the same Virginia, DC, and Maryland, DMV, but it's a completely different front office and coaching staff. Do you want to be a part of this? Come on, dog. Come down, man. And I'm not even gonna sit here and downplay Chris Harris because he lost the job to Ryan Nielsen. I told you again, over and over again, Ryan Nielsen is the top defensive coordinator. So just because the Jaguars chose Ryan Nielsen over Chris Harris does not mean that Chris Harris is not a potentially great defensive coordinator candidate out there. So keep that in mind. And then again, speaking of defensive coordinators out there trying to get jobs, another segue. You know what I'm saying? I'm on one today, man. We moving, man. For like a battle rapper. Let's get it, man. Round 2. Let's get it. The Philadelphia Eagles will interview former Commanders coach Ron Rivera for the vacant defensive coordinator position. Sources tell Donna Rossini and Ben Standig. News of Rivera's interview comes one day after Nick Sirianni fired defensive coordinator Sean Desai. So the Eagles do have a defensive coordinator vacancy. I'm very happy that Ryan Nielsen didn't take their job or even get a chance to interview for it or whatever happened. I'm glad that Ryan Nielsen is not over there coaching for the Eagles, because that would have been scary, especially with all of my Georgia Bulldogs over there. That would have been frightening. So Ron Rivera, go ahead. And I'm not even gonna sit here and downplay Ron Rivera. He's a pretty decent defensive coordinator. He's a better defensive coordinator than he is talent evaluator or head coach. I can at the very least give him that. But at the same time, I'm not afraid of Ron Rivera. He ends up being the Eagles defensive coordinator. Cool, you know what I'm saying? Nothing against him, nothing for him. Definitely no fear in my heart though. No fear. We hired Ben Johnson as our head coach. I fully expect us to put up crazy points against the Eagles with Ron Rivera as their defensive coordinator. I do not care. But also, this NFC East carousel right now is crazy because the Eagles also interviewed former Giants defensive coordinator Don Wink Martindale, the same guy that I want. That now that Ryan Nielsen is off the market, I feel like that's probably my number one candidate right now. I'm not 100% sure in that. I still want to do some more research around and stuff like that, watch a little bit more tape, see how some of these guys scheme people up and things like that, how they develop talent. But just by default, with Ryan Nielsen off the market, Don Wink Martindale automatically propels up into my favorite defensive coordinator candidate out there. Between him and Chris Harris, Don Wink Martindale is more proven. Chris Harris, I love his personality. But again, this is the same guy that just previously, very recently, cussed out Brian Daboll before storming out of the office, ignoring any phone calls, and then they finally just sat down like days later and was like, all right, let's just part ways. Let's just get this over with so we can move on. So I would love nothing more than to hire him as our defensive coordinator. So when we play the Giants 2 times a week, that man will have the most motivation in the world against the Giants. That boy will cook something up, something so fierce, something so serious. That boy will be in the lab against the Giants, man, at the very least. But I also feel like even outside of that, he's a really good defensive coordinator candidate. I may even do a full dive into him like I did Ryan Nielsen, especially now that Ryan Nielsen's off the table. And speaking of Ryan Nielsen, it's actually reported by Deanna Rossini that Ryan Nielsen did interview for the Eagles job, but he took the Jaguars job. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Well, we dodged one with that one. I'm telling y'all, Ryan Nielsen's serious, man. Jaguars should be very happy about that hire. But back to these Eagles, man. I mean, y'all out here interviewing ex-Giants defensive coordinator and an ex-Washington Commanders head coach as y'all defensive coordinator. What y'all trying to do, man? What y'all trying to pull? It's something's very fishy here, Eagles. Y'all trying to get the inside scoop on things? Well, it's too late for us because we're changing our entire staff. So there will be no insider trading, any inside information, any two-timing, any secret agent, double agent type of stuff going on, because we're changing everything. So any information that Ron Rivera could give you is not going to be useful. The only thing he can tell you is where the bathrooms are and what are the best bars and restaurants to go to in the DMV area potentially, but nothing X's and O's and fields wise. So I'm not worried about it. But Giants, you may need to watch out because y'all aren't. It doesn't look like they're doing a lot of changes other than their defensive coordinator. And if he goes to the Eagles, that could be a little ugly for them. But also, speaking of defensive coordinators and the NFC East, the Commanders plan to bring in Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn in for a second in-person interview. Wah, wah, wah. Quinn will be busy with plans to meet with the Titans on Wednesday and the Seahawks on Thursday. Hey, man, we didn't get an exact date of when we're bringing Dan Quinn in for a second interview. Hopefully it's after the Titans and Seahawks so that he goes ahead and takes especially that Seahawks job before he even gets a chance to do the second interview with us. Seahawks, please lock that door. Please lock that door, man. Do what you got to do, man. So right now, the first 2 candidates that are getting second interviews for the Washington Commanders are Lions defensive coordinator Raheem Morris and Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn. Are we more than likely going with a defensive-minded head coach situation, especially with Adam Peters saying in his initial press conference as the Commanders GM that he's looking for leadership first and foremost out of the qualities that he's looking for in a head coach. Now, second interview for Dan Quinn, of course, has me and a lot of our fan base just sick to our stomachs. Like, please Please, please. I mean, it's to the point that I'm not even sure about interviewing him as a defensive coordinator anymore. He looked like an elite defensive coordinator for a while, but now looking at what he did for the Falcons as a head coach and the Cowboys as a defensive coordinator, it seems like whenever the lights get the brightest, that's when he starts to fold. The regular season, he's locked down. Great talent evaluator, great development of talent, knows how to maximize his talent, get the most out of each player, put them in the right positions to succeed. But for some reason, when we get to the playoffs, all of that just goes out the window. That man only remembers, what is it, SpongeBob said, fine dining and cleaning or something like that. Like, he just erases everything. That boy ended up like Omelette du Fromage from Dexter, man. I don't know what happens when it gets to the playoffs where he just forgets defensive coordinating. It's really weird. So I'm to the point that I'm good on Dan Quinn, period, now. When I did my previous video a few days ago, maybe it was a week ago, I don't know, I've lost track of time because I've been doing so many videos. When I look and see a video that I already did, I thought it was last week and it was 2 days ago. So I don't know where I'm at right now. I'm not even sure what month we're in at this point. But when I did my video, whatever time I did it on Dan Quinn, I did say I was cool with him being our defensive coordinator. But after looking at that Packers game, man, I don't know about that either. But I know for sure, definitely not head coach. I mean, at this point, Dan Quinn has to be at least like 2% black or some. Because there's no other way to explain why he's coming in for an in-person interview. It's got to be some type of Rooney Rule thing. Or I'm just going to chalk this up as like some extreme, severe due diligence on Adam Peters and Josh Harris side. Give everybody second interviews type of thing. That must be the motto. Everybody gets a second interview, no matter how sorry. Only way that this even makes sense at all, man. I'm scared. I'm not gonna lie. I don't think it's likely that we hire him, but the fact that there's even a 1% chance, there's even a fraction of a chance, I'm uncomfortable. I'm uneasy right now. I'm not feeling too good about none of this. But man, we do have a list of guys that we have to wait to hire. So Dan Quinn and Raheem Morris are our first in-person interviews, but that's more so a case of the guys that we want the most, we haven't been able to interview. I mean, you have Bobby Slowick, who's now out of the playoffs, so we can interview him soon, but you know, he just lost this past weekend, whereas Raheem Morris and Dan Quinn, they lost the first round of the playoffs, the wild card round, so that's why we're able to interview them sooner, whereas guys that we're about to talk about now, like Detroit Lions' Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator that I mentioned earlier, that really was the MVP, if we're talking coordinators-wise, in that Rams-Lions game where Raheem Morris lost. Baltimore's Mike McDonald, the defensive coordinator, and Anthony Weaver. All of these top coaching candidates right now are still in the playoffs. So that's why Dan Quinn is like, well, we have, I guess, nobody else to interview. You might as well go ahead and come on down. I mean, Bobby Slowick is now available, but again, there was a reason that Dan Quinn and Raheem Morris's interviews were already in place sooner, because they lost a whole round before Bobby Slowick. So now Bobby Slowick will probably get an interview soon, upcoming, maybe like late this week or early next week or something like that. We'll see. I haven't heard anything about it, but we already interviewed him virtually, so there's clear interest. More than likely going to bring him in for a second interview in person at some point. But this is the downside of wanting playoff caliber Super Bowl contending coordinators. There's a reason that we want them, and at the same time, there's a reason that we can't interview them. We want them so much because they're great coordinators and potential head coaching candidates, but they're also still in the playoffs, so we can't even interview them because they're such great coordinators and head coaching candidates. They're doing a great job right now. Their teams are winning in the playoffs. They still have a chance to win a Super Bowl, and that's literally why we want them. So that's the good side. We could end up getting a really great guy, the guy that we want between the top candidates, but at the same time, we have to wait to interview these guys. And like I've already explained, with us missing out on Ryan Nielsen, these guys that we want to hire as our potential head coach still winning is delaying our ability to hire a defensive coordinator. We got to get the head coach first before we get the defensive coordinator, and maybe by the time we can even interview Ben Johnson in person or Mike McDonald in person, maybe it's too late and all of the great coordinators are gone or something like that as far as that goes. But you never know. Maybe they have a random guy that we never thought of that they're going to bring in that they trust the most at different positions. I can see a scenario like that happening. But just to let you know, as far as Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Mike McDonald, and Anthony Weaver, we cannot have a second interview with either of those guys until Monday, January 29th at the very soonest. The very soonest. And remember, Mike McDonald is the head coaching candidate, Grim Reaper. I mean, this guy has been going through. We're gonna talk about Ben Johnson soon, but we have to stop and talk about Mike Macdonald and what he's doing. He shut down Bobby Slowick twice. He bullied Ben Johnson the one time they played, held him to 6 points or something like that. Shut down Mike McDaniel as well, arguably the most explosive offense in the NFL. Shut down Kyle Shanahan, had Brock Purdy, who was getting MVP candidate chants and remarks and all these analysts saying all of that stuff on ESPN and stuff like that, and then immediately made that man throw 4 interceptions and get benched for Sam Darnold to finish out the game. That's what Mike Macdonald's doing right now. Any offensive genius, any offensive mastermind, Mike Macdonald's coming and shutting them down. I don't know if he's motivated and that's why he's doing it, but hey man, I see my boy Roquan Smith, my Georgia dog, over there giving them pregame speeches like it's time to dominate, like we're gonna set the tone and stuff like that. And I feel like Mike Macdonald has a lot to do with that. You see how dominant Michigan's defense has been the past couple of years. He was defensive coordinator there just 2 years ago, and I feel like a lot of he left a big impact on what Michigan still ran when they just won the NFC championship. I mean, that's my fault. The NCAA championship, college football championship. That's my fault right there. But either way, Mike Macdonald, everywhere he's been as defensive coordinator, has dominated at defense. And if you're afraid of the most elite offensive minds out there, whether it's Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick, again twice, Kyle Shanahan, or Mike Macdonald, Mike McDaniel's my fault. Mike Macdonald shuts all of that down. So we got to acknowledge him as one of the top coordinators and top head coaching candidates just off that alone. But Ben Johnson, on the other hand, boy, he balled out. That boy looked like that was probably one of his most impressive games in that playoff game yesterday, man. That game was really nice against the Buccaneers. Definitely better than against the Rams. But you can also give Raheem Morris a lot of credit for that. That's why he's coming in for a second interview. He had that Ben Johnson that we just saw against the Buccaneers looking pretty mortal in that Rams-Lions game. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about Raheem Morris. But at the same time, Ben Johnson against the Buccaneers was amazing. Put together some beautiful drives. Guys wide open. I mean, the offense just looks so easy for Jared Goff. Now imagine a quarterback with more talent, natural talent. You know, I'm not saying that if we draft a quarterback number 2 overall, day one, they're better than Jared Goff. But imagine out of all of these top quarterback guys that we're looking at right now, prospects in the draft, all of them are more mobile, and all of them have much stronger arms than a Jared Goff. So imagine what Ben Johnson could do with that, man. And I would say he definitely passed his final interview for the Commanders at this point. That Buccaneers game was it. We'll just talk in person to talk contract. But as far as offering you the job, that Buccaneers performance, you passed the second interview. You already did yours. You know, we just in person is literally just for numbers at this point. And just remember, over the last 72 hours, Ben Johnson has had 5 virtual head coaching interviews and still helped the Lions to their first divisional playoff win in 32 years. And he's arguably the mastermind behind that, especially on the offensive side. Shouts out to Tim Hasselbeck because he brings up a great point, man. Some guys just have a knack for calling the right play at the right time, and that's what Ben Johnson seems to do, man. I told you, like, Bobby Slowick is arguably my favorite candidate just off of quarterback development and maximizing talent and doing more with less. Those are probably the traits he has the most. But Ben Johnson, it just seems like whenever he needs a drive to win a game, he's like the number one guy for that. And also getting guys involved, I would say he's number one as far as head coaching candidates for that, because I forgot the exact stat, but as far as like having 2 running backs reach a certain amount of yards all purpose, 2 wide receivers and a tight end to reach a certain amount of yards in a season, he's the first in NFL history to do that. I forgot the exact stat, but it was something crazy that no other offense has done in NFL history with 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers and a tight end. It's something crazy. So if we're talking about the whole Eric Bieniemy problem with getting guys involved, man, and he literally gets his favorite targets, his best targets, the ball. All his best players are involved all of the time. We were hoping Eric Bieniemy would do that, but he didn't. It just never worked out, really. Poor Terry McLaurin was struggling up to the very last game, up until the 4th quarter with like 2 minutes left to reach 1,000 yards receiving in a 17-game season. Meanwhile, Sam Howell has, I think, attempted the most passes in the NFL. That's just ridiculous, man. So I don't want to blame Eric Bieniemy too much for that because there's a lot of different factors in there. But I'm hoping that Ben Johnson, looking at what he did with the Lions, he can come do that for us. But also, man, how he makes things easy for Jared Goff for the quarterback position as far as the Commanders are concerned, how he makes things so easy for the quarterback. I mean, look at this right here. Quarterback expected completion percentage in the playoff round. who had the easiest throws asked to them, basically. Jared Goff, 67%, and poor CJ Stroud, the lowest, 58%. Really interesting. So Ben Johnson, you could argue, makes his offense the easiest for a quarterback out of any coordinator, at the very least in the playoffs. Also, Jahmyr Gibbs is the only rookie running back in Lions history to have multiple touchdowns in a single postseason. That's incredible. Also, there's a random connection here. Shouts out to Resh Manuel on Twitter. He pointed this out. Never noticed this. Didn't even think about it. A bit of an Adam Peters, Ben Johnson connection I completely forgot about. Lions COO Mike Disner, who just withdrew his name from the Panthers GM consideration. We're going to talk about that soon, about the Panthers struggling. And Peters were both together in the Patriots scouting department in the early 2000s. So that's another insider to get some background information on Ben Johnson. Also, Ben Johnson to get some background information on Adam Peters and things like that. That's what I'm saying. All of these connections that Adam Peters and the Washington Commanders have to Ben Johnson Alliance is only helping us go through with this process and get it through sooner, and maybe allowing Ben Johnson to trust us more, allowing us to trust Ben Johnson more, because we have all of these connections. Of course, like I've already reported and said several times, our Rick Spielman, who's helping Josh Harris build this front office from the ground up the right way, helped potentially hire Adam Peters, and along with Bob Myers and these guys, he's helping on like the front office side of things. That's another connection. Rick Spielman, his brother Chris Spielman, is a top executive for the Lions. So we have at least more than one connection linked to Ben Johnson. And so, hey man, I'll take it. The more the merrier, man. Also, we do got to think about with Ben Johnson though. We got to question some things. Is that, can Ben Johnson come in and coach? Because this man, Dan Campbell, is doing a great job of being the motivator, the alpha, the personality, the culture. Can Ben Johnson do that, man? Because Dan Campbell, and also even just like the aggressiveness, like going forward on fourth down and things like that. Is that a Dan Campbell thing? Is that a Ben Johnson thing? All I know is, after seeing Ron Rivera with this whole Riverboat Ron thing and then coming here and being extremely conservative, I'm hoping Ben Johnson is the complete antithesis to that. So, I mean, those are just a few questions when it comes to Ben Johnson. We know his coordinating. We know his offense. We know his getting guys involved, your best players involved consistently. Like, we can finally draft Commanders players in fantasy with a straight face when you hire Ben Johnson as a head coach, is the best way to put it. But can he lead men? And again, just to reiterate, Adam Peters said the number one thing he's looking for in a head coach is leadership. But at the same time, we've heard reports from several different sources that not only Ben Johnson is our top head coaching candidate, like our favorite, like we're the bed nods, all of that type of stuff. That marriage right there is the most likely to happen out of any of them. But also, we've seen reports that Adam Peters is beelining and zoning in on, focusing on hiring Ben Johnson. He's the top candidate, is willing to go all in, whatever it takes type of thing. So we'll see how this goes. Also, really interesting stat that kind of goes against the whole Ben Johnson thing, or any of these top candidates that we wanted: Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick, and Mike McDonald. Of the 4 remaining head coaches in the playoffs, 3 were never an offensive or defensive coordinator at any level prior to getting their head coaching jobs. You have Andy Reid, Dan Campbell, and John Harbaugh. Even though John Harbaugh was a long-term special teams coordinator, and a lot of people do say that those make great head coaches. That's how that one guy got that job going from the Patriots to the Giants. I forgot his name, but special teams coordinator, a lot of people like to hire those guys as head coaches, so I'm not surprised. Kyle Shanahan is the only guy that was at the very least an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator before getting his head coaching job out of the 4 remaining head coaches. So with Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick, and Mike McDonald being coordinators, you know, it doesn't sound like the odds are in our favor right now, but I expect them to be able to break that curse. Now, moving on, again, like I mentioned, the Panthers are struggling out here a little bit because they have had second interviews with some GM candidates, but Lions COO Mike Disner, who we just talked about earlier, there's a connection between Adam Peters and Ben Johnson, potentially withdrew from the Panthers GM search. So that boy had an interview with those guys and was like, nah, I think I'm good. So the Panthers better hurry up and hire a GM before Ben Johnson becomes available, because I don't think having Ben Johnson interview and become a head coach is very likely if you don't have a GM in place. I think it's very ugly. I think if I'm Ben Johnson, I need to know who this GM is going to be, man. I need that guy hired because I need to know if we have the same values and views and goals as the far and strategies and processes, how to build this team into a Super Bowl winner and all of that type of stuff. Are we going to be on the same page, or are we going to clash like the Titans did with Mike Vrabel and their GM? Are we just like a ticking time bomb that's just, it's inevitable, one of us is going to have to leave type of situation, and it's more than likely going to be the head coach? So am I willing to take this job just to end up having to look for another head coaching job soon? I don't think so. That's just not enough stability, honestly, from Ben Johnson's point of view. Not even being a biased burgundy and gold fan, just from Ben Johnson's point of view, I wouldn't like what the Panthers got going on top of what David Tepper has going on himself as the worst owner in the NFL now that Dan Snyder's gone. Now, moving on, also, the Bears look like they're poised to just go ahead and take Caleb Williams first overall. It just looks like it's going to happen. It's already highly likely, and I would definitely argue that it's the right move to make. But now it just seems like it's got to happen. Because at first, they looked like they were potentially hiring Cliff Kingsbury, and that had everybody saying, oh, yeah, Caleb Williams are locked to number one. But now they've officially hired ex-Seahawks offensive coordinator Shane Waldron and his connection to Caleb Williams. Well, and y'all already know I'm sick. You know, Ryan Nielsen, who just became the defensive coordinator for the Jaguars, was my number one defensive coordinator candidate. And then Seahawks offensive coordinator Shane Waldron was my favorite offensive coordinator candidate if we went with a defensive-minded head coach like a Mike McDonald. So Ben Johnson, Bobby Sloyd, go get Ryan Nielsen. We get Mike McDonald as our head coach, go get a Shane Waldron, but both of those guys are now off the market. Y'all know I'm absolutely sick to my stomach. Now I got to go find my next favorite offensive coordinator candidate, potentially, especially if we go with a defensive-minded head coach like a Raheem Morris, Mike McDonald, or maybe a Dan Quinn. I really hope not. But either way, going back on topic, the Bears' new offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron from the Seahawks, has been an offensive coordinator for 3 years and comes from the Sean McVay coaching tree. He has ties to the QB Collective, which is currently working with USC quarterback Caleb Williams. So it seems like the Bears are doing whatever it takes. It was either Cliff Kingsbury or Shane Waldron. Either way, we have like a quick little back door to like a link to Caleb Williams and some access to know how he's looking, how he's developing, how he's working this offseason before we lead up to the draft. All of that type of stuff. Also, really interesting, I don't know if y'all know, and I didn't realize this either, I completely forgot. My favorite offensive coordinator candidate out there, now that he's gone though, but he was a former offensive quality control coach for Jay Gruden. And he followed Sean McVay to the Rams, and he's made his way around, and now he is the offensive coordinator for the Bears and will more than likely be coaching up and developing Caleb Williams, and that sounds amazing. Shane Waldron, Caleb Williams combination sounds like it's just destined to be successful, man. Watch out for the Bears, man. They might be a problem. Also, the Seahawks are now getting second interviews with head coaching candidates, including Panthers defensive coordinator Ijiro Evero, Raiders defensive coordinator Patrick Graham, Giants defensive coordinator Mike Kafka, Rams defensive coordinator Raheem Morris, and Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn. Now, it's reported that there will likely be others too because it's a thorough process, but notice that Ben Johnson's name was not on that list. I want to point that out. So, I want to give myself credit for that too. Ex-Seahawks offensive coordinator. Now, who are the Seahawks bringing in for their offensive coordinator? And Ben Johnson's not one of them. You see how that all tied in, how we came back full circle? Come on, dog. I'm on one today, man. Let's get it. The video I do after this one today, man, is coming with some high expectations after the way I strung this one together, boy. I chef today, man. Also, before we get up out of here, I want to point out some crazy things with the Chiefs and basically give us a goal to look forward to. After we hire our head coach, the physical coordinator, find our quarterback in the draft, or whatever we do in the draft, trade back, whatever, Sam Howell to the quarterback, don't care. Either way, right now, we have a goal to look forward to. Let's just check out these Chiefs stats and see, like, I mean, we've already talked about hopefully we could be like the Texans, going from number 2 overall pick to division winner and also winning a playoff game within just 1 year. That's it, less than a year technically. Also, here's the Chiefs' goals, because this is the pinnacle of goals. The Texans, great. Still not very likely at all. Still a very high goal to reach. And, I wouldn't bet my life savings on whether we can do what the Texans did. But an even higher goal to aspire to is the Patrick Mahomes-led Chiefs and all of that, man. Because he's been a starter for 6 seasons, and he's about to play in his 6th AFC title game. That man played 1 game, the very last game of the season, when he was drafted. Because Alex Smith started the entire season. Then they already secured their playoff spot, so they went ahead and just let Pat Mahomes go out there for 1 really valuable game. I mean, I'm pretty sure Pat Mahomes still would have been Pat Mahomes, but him going out there for that one game, getting to start that one game, last game of the season, was probably pretty huge in his development. And now the way, ever since he's been the official starting quarterback going into a regular season, 6 seasons, he has now gone to his 6th AFC title game. All he knows is AFC title games. That's crazy, man. I mean, he's always one win away from going to the Super Bowl his entire career so far. It is crazy. And just to remind you, while he's been to 6 AFC title games in 6 seasons, the Commanders have not been to an NFC title game in 33 seasons. That's the parallel. That's the goal right there. I mean, that's ridiculous. Also, Andy Reid is about to coach his 11th conference title game in 25 years as a head coach. 5 with the Eagles and 6 now with the Chiefs. He's coached for a conference title in 44% of his seasons running NFL teams. He's revered and yet somehow still slept on. Shouts out to Grant Paulson for that. So hopefully whoever we hire as our head coach is that successful. Can we get Andy Reid's success, man? That right there is the goal. And the same thing with the quarterback in Pat Mahomes. Also, shouts out to Ref the District for this as well. Make sure you subscribe to them, follow them on Twitter, everything, because I always bring them up with great reason. The Chiefs defense hasn't given up 30 points in a game all year. That's including the playoffs of 19 games. And just to remind you, the Commanders defense gave up at least 30 points 10 times in 17 games, 2 less games, and gave up 30 points 10 times, compared to the Chiefs played 2 more games and never gave up 30 points. So we also got to hope that we hit on defensive coordinator. That's why I'm sick about Ryan Nielsen. Maybe we can go and get my boy Don Wink Martindale, who cussed out Brian Daboll, to be our defensive coordinator, and maybe we can aspire to do what the Chiefs have done on defense. Even after losing Travarius Ward to the 49ers, their defense is still elite, and if anything, got even better somehow. Also, the Lions went from 0-16 in this century, which is incredible, and still has made the conference championship before the Dallas Cowboys. Man, give it up to that, man. Shouts out to _Chef Don _ on Twitter for being that petty. I love it. The Lions went 0-16 this century and still made a conference championship before Dallas. That's absolutely amazing, man. So yeah, man, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get a notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. I didn't even notice I was recording for 43 minutes. I did not expect this video to be that long, but hey, man, when you're having fun, time flies, man. I love talking football with y'all. Again, the whole sole reason I made this channel is because I'm just always curious about stats like this, and it was just like, one day, why not actually just talk about it so everybody else and other people can know these stats that I care about, or know the process of what's going on behind the scenes with the Commanders? Because even if I didn't have a YouTube channel, I would still be doing all of this research and putting together all of these stats, because that's just who I am. That's literally why I made a Twitter, for advanced stats and things like that. I'm a big stats and X's and O's guys. I love film sessions and things like that. That's why I love the off season. With the college film sessions, I'm in the high school recruiting for my Georgia Bulldog. I'm just super football X's and O's and stats guy, and I just figured, hey man, why not just go ahead and put it in video form for other people to know? So hey man, even though this video ended up going way longer than I expected, I had fun doing it. I thought it was gonna only 20 minutes. So make sure y'all stay tuned. A lot more content coming out. Again, I'm getting back to doing 2-3 videos a day, so be on the lookout for at least one more video sometime later this evening, and I'm gonna catch y'all later, man. I appreciate y'all. Stay tuned. I'm out.